Hello. Hopefully I can see this all right. I've decided just to do another, actually, I'm going to have to turn the light on. My old eyes. I've decided to do another read aloud of We. And because I'm afraid, I don't know that I'll get through the whole thing tonight, but if I wait too much longer, I'll forget what the plot is about. So I thought it would be good to keep reading and keep going for those of you guys who are following along. And I think there's still about 400 views on the latest installment. So there's some people who are interested in finding out what our numerical characters are up to. So this is 26th entry. And we're on page 148 of 231. So there's about 100 pages left. All right. Morning. Through the ceiling, the sky, firm, round, ruddy-cheeked as ever. I think I would be less astonished if I had seen above me some extraordinary square sun. People in varicolored garments of animal skins, stone, untransparent walls. Does it mean then that the world, our world, still exists? Or is this merely by inertia? The generator is already switched off, but the gears still clatter, turning 2 revolutions, 3, and on the 4th, they'll stop. Are you familiar with this strange condition? You wake at night, open your eyes to the blackness, and suddenly you feel you've lost your way. And quickly you grope around you, seeking something familiar, solid, a wall, a lamp, a chair. This was exactly how I groped around me. I ran through the pages of the One State Gazette. Quick, and then. Yesterday, we celebrated Unanimity Day, which everyone had long awaited with impatience. For the 48th time, the benefactor, who has demonstrated his steadfast wisdom on so many occasions, was elected by unanimous vote. The celebration was marred by a slight disturbance caused by the enemies of happiness. These enemies have naturally forfeited the right to serve as bricks in the foundation of the one state, a foundation renewed by yesterday's election. It is clear to everyone that taking account of their votes would be as absurd as considering the coughs of some sick persons in the audience as part of a magnificent, heroic symphony. Oh, all wise, are we, after all, saved in spite of everything? Indeed, what objection can be raised to this most crystal clear of syllogisms? And 2 lines farther. Today at 12, there will be a joint session of the administrative office, the medical office, and the office of the guardians. An important state action will take place within the next few days. No, the walls are still intact. Here they are. I can feel them. And I no longer have that strange sensation that I'm lost, that I am in some way, in some unknown place, and I do not know the way. And it's no longer surprising that I see the blue sky, the round sun, and everyone, as usual, is going to work. I walked along the avenue with especially firm, ringing steps, and it seemed to me that everybody else walked with the same assurance. But when I turned at a crossing, I saw that everyone shied off sideways from the corner building, gave it a wide berth, as if a pipe had burst there and cold water were gushing out, making it impossible to use the sidewalk. Another 5, 10 steps, and I was also showered with cold water, shaken, thrown off the sidewalk. At the height of some 2 meters, a rectangular sheet of paper was pasted on the wall, bearing an incomprehensible, venomously green inscription. Nephi. And beneath it, the S-shaped back, transparent wing ears, quivering with anger or excitement, his right hand raised, his left stretched helplessly back like a hurt, broken wing. He was leaping up, trying to tear off the paper, and could not reach it, every time just short of touching it. Each passerby was probably deterred by the same thought. If I come over, just I, of all these others, won't he think I'm guilty of something and therefore trying? I confessed to the same thought, but I recalled the many times when he was truly my guardian angel, the many times he saved me, and I boldly walked up to him, stretched my hand, and pulled off the sheet. S turned, quickly bored his gimlets into me to the very bottom, found something there, and then he raised his left eyebrow and winked with it at the wall where Nephi had just hung, and flicked a corner of a smile at me, which seemed somehow astonishingly gay. But then it was really nothing to wonder at. A physician will always prefer a rash and a 40-degree fever to the tormenting, slow rising temperature of the incubation period. At least the nature of the illness is clear. The Nephi scattered on the walls today is the rash. I understood the smile. Steps down to the underground and underfoot on the immaculate glass of the stairs, again, white sheet, Nephi. And on the wall below, on a bench, on a mirror in the car, evidently pasted hurriedly, Ari, everything the same, white, frightening rash. And in the silence, the distinct hum of the wheels was like the noise of inflamed blood. Someone was touched upon the shoulder. He started and dropped a roll of papers. And on my left, another, reading the same line in his newspaper over and over. The paper trembling faintly. I felt that everywhere in the wheels, hands, newspapers, eyelashes, the pulse was beating faster and faster. And perhaps today, when I got there with I-330, the temperature will be 39, 40, 41 degrees centigrade, marked on the thermometer by a black line. At the dock, the same silence, humming like a distant, invisible propeller. The machines stand glowering silently, and only the cranes are gliding scarce audibly as if on tiptoe, bending down, grasping in their claws the pale blue blocks of frozen air and loading them into the tanks of the Integral. We are already preparing it for its test flight. Well, do you think we'll finish loading in a week? I asked the second builder. His face is like fine china, embellished with sweet pale blue and delicately rosy flowers, eyes, lips. But today they are somehow faded, washed away. We calculate aloud, but I break off in the middle of a word and I stand there, gaping, high under the cupola on the blue block just lifted by the crane, a scarcely visible white square, a pasted sheet of paper, and all of me shakes. Could it be with laughter? Yes, I hear myself laughing. Do you know the feeling when you hear your own laughter? No, listen, I say, imagine yourself in an ancient plane. The altimeter shows 5,000 meters. The wing snaps. You plunge down like a tumbler pigeon. And on the way, you calculate tomorrow from 12 to 2, from 2 to 6, at 6, dinner. Isn't that absurd? But that's exactly what we're doing now. And the little blue flowers stir, bulge. What if I were made of glass and he could see that in some 3 or 4 hours? This is a read aloud of We. This is the 6th session. So if you want to catch up, go back to the playlist. And there's 5 before this. This is the 27th entry. Topics, none impossible. I am alone in endless corridors, the same ones under the ancient house, a mute concrete sky, water dripping somewhere on stone, familiar, heavy, opaque door, and a muted hum behind it. She said she would come out to me exactly at 16, but it is already 5 minutes past 16, 10, 15, no one. For a second, I am the old I, terrified that the door might open. 5 more minutes. And if she does not come, water dripping somewhere on stone, no one. With anguished joy, I feel I'm saved. I slowly walk back along the corridor. The quivering dotted line of bulbs on the ceiling grows dimmer and dimmer. And suddenly a door clicks hastily behind me, the quick patter of feet softly rebounding from the walls, the ceiling, and there she is, light, airy, somewhat breathless, with running, breathing through her mouth. I knew you would be here. I knew you'd come. I knew you. and the spears of her eyelashes spread open. They let me in, and well, how to describe what it does to me, this ancient, absurd, miraculous ritual when her lips touch mine? What formula can express the storm that sweeps everything out of my own soul but her? Yes, yes, my soul, and laugh if you will. And slowly, with an effort, she raises her lids, and her words come slowly with an effort. No, enough. Later, let us go now. And the door opens, stairs, worn, old, and an intolerably motley noise, whistling, light. Nearly 24 hours have passed since then, and everything has settled down to some extent within me, and yet it is extremely difficult to describe what happened, even approximately. It is as if a bomb has been exploded in my head, and open mouths, wings, shouts, leaves, words, rocks piled side by side, one after the other. I remember my first thought was, quick, rush back. It seemed clear to me while I had waited in the corridor that they had managed somehow to blow up or destroy the green wall, and everything from out there had swept in and flooded our city, which had long ago been purged of the lower world. I must have said something of the kind to I-330, and she laughed. Oh no, we've simply come up outside beyond the green wall. And I opened my eyes face to face with me, and in wide awake reality was that which hitherto had not been seen by any living man except diminished, 1,000-fold, muted and dimmed by the thick, cloudy glass of the wall. The sun. This was not our sun, evenly diffused over the mirror smooth surface of our pavements. These were living fragments, continually shifting spots, which dazed the eyes and made the head reel, and the trees like candles rising up into the sky itself, like spiders crouching on the earth with gnarled paws, like mute green fountains, and everything was crawling, stirring, rustling. Some shaggy little ball dashed out from underfoot, and I was frozen to the spot. I could not make a step because under my feet was not a level surface. You understand, not a firm level surface, but something revoltingly soft, yielding, springing, green, alive. I was stunned by it all. I gasped. I gagged. Perhaps this was the most accurate word. I stood clutching at some swaying bough with both hands. It's nothing. It's nothing. It's only in the beginning. It will pass. Don't be afraid. And next to I-330 against the green, dizzying, shifting lattice work, somebody's finest profile, paper thin. No, not somebody's. I know him. I remember it is the doctor. No, no, my mind is clear. I see everything. Now they are laughing. They have seized me by the arms and dragged me forward. My feet get tangled and slip. Before us, moss, hillocks, screeching, cawing, twigs, trees, trunks, wings, leaves, whistles. And then suddenly the trees spread out, run apart, a bright green clearing. And in the clearing, people, or I don't know what to call them, perhaps more precisely, beings. And here comes the most difficult part of all, because this transcended every limit of probability. And now it is clear to me why I-330 had always stubbornly refused to speak about it. I should not have believed her anyway, not even her. Perhaps tomorrow I will not believe even myself, even these notes. In the clearing around a bare skull-like rock, there was a noisy crowd of 300 or 400 people. I must say people. It is difficult to call them anything else, just as on the platforms in our plaza one sees at first only familiar faces. So here I first saw only our gray-blue eunuchs. A second more, and there among the eunuchs clearly and simply black, red, golden, bay, roan, and white people. They must have been people, and they were all without clothing, and they were all covered with short, glossy fur, like the fur that can be seen by anyone on the stuffed horse in the prehistoric museum. But the females had faces exactly like those of our women, delicately rosy and free of hair, and they had breasts large, firm, of splendid geometric form. The males had only parts of their faces hairless, like our ancestors. All of this was so incredible, so unexpected that I stood calmly. Yes, calmly, and looked. It was the same as with a scale. You overload one side, and then no matter how much more you add, the arrow won't move more. Suddenly, I was alone. I-330 was no longer with me. I didn't know where or how she had disappeared. Around me, only these beings, their furry bodies glowing like satin in the sun. I seized someone's hot, firm, raven shoulder. For the benefactor's sake, tell me, where did she go? Why just now, just a moment ago? Stern, shaggy eyebrows turned to me. Shh, quiet. And he nodded shaggily towards the center of the clearing, towards the yellow skull-like stone. And there above the heads above everyone, I saw her. The sun shone from behind her directly into my eyes, and all of her stood out sharp, coal black against the blue cloth of the sky, a charcoal silhouette etched on blue. Just overhead, some clouds floated by, and it seemed that not the clouds, but the stone and she herself, and not with her, the crowd and the clearings were gliding as silently as a ship, and the earth itself, grown light, was floating underfoot. Brothers, she spoke, brothers, you all know there in the city behind the wall. They are building the integral, and you know the day has come when we shall break down the wall, all the walls, to let the green wind blow free from end to end across the earth. But the integral is meant to take these walls up there into the heights to thousands of other earths whose fires will rustle to you tonight through the black leaves. Waves, foam, wind against the stone. Down with the integral, down. No, brothers, not down, but the integral must be ours. On the day when it first rises into the sky, we shall be in it, because the builder of the integral is with us. He has come out from behind the wall. He has come here with me to be among you. Long live the builder. A moment, and I was somewhere above. Beneath me, heads, wide open, shouting, mouths, arms flashing up and falling. It was extraordinary, intoxicating. I felt myself above all others. I was I, a separate entity, a world. I had ceased to be a component, as I had been, and I had become a unit. And now, with the dented, crumpled, happy body, as happy as after a love embrace, I am below, right near the stone. Sun, voices from above, I-330 smiling, a golden-haired, satiny golden woman spreading the fragrance of grass. In her hands, a cup, apparently of wood, and she takes a sip from it with scarlet lips and hands it to me, and greedily, with closed eyes, to quench the fire, I drink the sweet, stinging, cold, fiery sparks. And then my blood and the whole world 1,000 times faster. The light earth flies like down, and everything is light and simple and clear. And now I see the huge familiar letters, Mi-Fi, on the stone. And for some reason, this is right and necessary. It is the strong, simple thread that links everything together. I see a crude image, perhaps on the same stone, a winged youth with a transparent body where the heart should be, a dazzling crimson glowing coal. And again, I understand this coal. Or no, I feel it just as, without hearing, I feel every word she is speaking from above, from the stone. And I feel that everybody breathes together and everybody will fly together somewhere like the birds over the wall that day. From behind, from the densely breathing crowd of bodies, a loud voice. But this is madness. And then it seems that I believe it was I, jumped up on the stone, sun, heads, a green serrated line against the blue, and I shout, yes, madness. And everyone must lose his mind. Everyone must. The sooner, the better. It is essential. I know it. Next to me, I-330, her smile, 2 dark lines from the ends of her lips and at the angle. And the coal is now within me, and all that is this instant easy, just a bit painful and beautiful. And after that, only broken, separate fragments. Slowly, just overhead, a bird. I see. It is alive like me. Like a man, it turns its head right, left, and black, round eyes drill into me. Another fragment. A back with shiny fur, the color of old ivory. A dark insect with tiny transparent wings crawls along the back, and the back twitches to drive it off and twitches again. Another fragment. The shadow of the leaves interlaced, latticed. In the shadow, people are lying and chewing something that resembles the legendary food of the ancients, a long yellow fruit and a piece of something dark. A woman thrusts it into my hand, and it is funny. I don't know whether I can eat it. Again, a crowd, heads, feet, hands, mouths, faces flash momentarily and disappear, burnt like bubbles. For a moment, or did it merely seem to me transparent, flying wing ears? With all my strength, I press the hand of I-330, and she glances back. What is it? He is here, it seemed to me. He? Who? S. Just a moment ago in the crowd. The coal black, thin eyebrows rise to the temples. A sharp triangle, a smile. I do not understand why she is smiling. How can she smile? Don't you see? Don't you see what it means if he or any of them is here? Silly. Would it occur to anyone there inside the wall that we are here? Try to remember. Did you ever think that it was possible? They are hunting for us. There, let them. You're dreaming. And she smiles lightly, gaily, and I smile. The earth, intoxicated, light, gay, floats. 28th entry. I see if you're in there, Simba, I'm not sure if it was you who was asking about the links to the maps, but I put them in the comment on the other video, so you can look for them there. 28th entry, 2 women, entropy and energy, the opaque part of the body. If your world is like the world of our distant forebears, imagine that you have stumbled upon a 6th, a 7th continent in the ocean, some Atlantis with fantastic labyrinth cities and people soaring in the air without the aid of wings or arrows, rocks lifted by the power of a glance. In short, things that would never occur to you even if you suffer from dream sickness. And this is how I felt yesterday, because you understand, as I have told you before, not one of us has been beyond the wall since the 200 Years' War. I know. It is my duty before you, my unknown friends, to tell you in greater detail about the strange and unexpected world that revealed itself to me yesterday. But I am still unable to return to that. There is a constant flood of new and new events, and I cannot collect them all. And I lift the edges of my unif and I hold out my palms, and yet the whole pailfuls spill past, and only drops fall on these pages. First, I heard loud voices behind my door and recognized the voice of I-330, firm, metallic, and the other almost inflexible, like a wooden ruler, the voice of you. And then the door flew open with a crash and catapulted both of them into my room. Yes, exactly, catapulted. I-330 put her hand on the back of my chair and smiled at the other over her right shoulder, only with her teeth. I would not like to be faced with such a smile. Listen, I-30 said to me. This woman, it appears, has set herself the task of protecting you from me, like a small child. Is that with your permission? And the other, her gills quivering. Yes, he is a child. He is. That is the only reason he doesn't see that you're with him. And that it's only in order to that it's all a game. Yes, and it is my duty. And for a moment in the mirror, the broken jumping line of my eyebrows, I sprang up, and with difficulty restraining within me the other, with the shaking hairy fists, with the difficulty squeezing out each word through my teeth, I threw at her straight at the gills. Out. This very moment. Get out. And the gills swelled out, brick red, and then drooped and turned gray, and she opened her mouth to say something, and then, saying nothing, snapped it shut and walked out. I rushed to I-330. I'll never forgive myself. She dared to, you? Well, but you don't think that I mean, it's because she wants to register for me. Well, fortunately, she won't have time to register. And I don't care if there are 1,000 like her. I know you will believe me, not the 1,000. Because after what happened yesterday, I am open to you, all of me, to the very end, just as you wanted. I am in your hands. You can at any moment. Well, what do you mean at any moment? And immediately I understood. The blood rushed to my ears, my cheeks. I cried, don't ever speak to me about it. You know that it was the other L, the old one. And now, who can tell? A human being is like a novel. Until the last page, you don't know how it will end, or it wouldn't be worth reading. She stroked my head, and I could not see her face, but I could tell by her voice that she was looking far, far off. Her eyes caught by a cloud, floating soundlessly, slowly, who knows where. Suddenly, she thrust me away firmly, but tenderly. Listen, I've come to tell you that these may be the last days that the auditoriums have been canceled as of this evening. Canceled? Yes. And as I walked past, I saw they were preparing something in the auditoriums, tables, medics in white. What can it mean? I don't know. No one knows as yet, and that's the worst of it. But I feel the current is switched on. The spark is running. If not today, then tomorrow, but perhaps they won't have time enough. I have long ceased to understand who they are. Who are we? I do not know what I want, whether I want them to have time enough or not. But one thing is clear to me. I 330 is now walking on the very edge, and at any moment. But this is madness, I say. You and the one state, I mean, it's like putting a hand over the muzzle of a gun and hoping to stop the bullet. I mean, it's utter madness. A smile. Everyone must lose his mind. The sooner the better. Somebody said this yesterday. Do you remember out there? Well, yes, I've written it down. Hence, it really happened. And silently, I stare into her face. The dark cross is especially distinct on it now. Darling, before it's too late, if you want, I will leave everything. I will forget it all. Let's go together there beyond the wall to those, well, whoever they are. And she shook her head. Through the dark windows of her eyes, deep within her, I saw a flaming oven, sparks, tongues, a fire leaping up, a heaping pile of dry wood, and it was clear to me it was too late. My words would no longer avail. And she stood up. In a moment, she would leave. These might be the last days, perhaps the last minutes. I seized her hand. No, just a little longer. Oh, for the sake, for the sake. And she slowly raised my hand, my hairy hand, which I hated so much, towards the light. I wanted to pull it away, but she held it firmly. Your hand. You don't know, few know it, that there were women here, women of the city who loved the others. You too must have some drops of sunny forest blood, and perhaps that's why. Silence. And strangely, this silence, this emptiness made my heart race madly, and I cried, and you will not go until you tell me about them, because you love them, and I don't even know who they are, where they are, who are they, the half we have lost, H2 and O, and in order to get H2O, streams, oceans, waterfalls, waves, storms, the two halves must unite. And I remember every moment she made. I remember how she picked up from the table my glass triangle, and while I spoke, she pressed its sharp edge into her cheek, and there was a white line on the cheek, and then it had filled with pink and vanished. And how strange that I cannot recall her words, especially at first, only fragmentary images and colors. I know that in the beginning she spoke about the 200 Years' War. I saw red on the green of grass, on dark clay, on blue snow, red, undrying pools, and then yellow sun-parched grasses and naked yellow, shaggy men and shaggy dogs together near swollen corpses, canine or perhaps human. And this, of course, outside the wall, for the city had already conquered. The city had our present food synthesized of petroleum. And almost from the very sky down to the ground, black, heavy, swaying curtains, slow columns of smoke over woods, over villages, stifled, howling, black, endless lines driven to the city to be saved by force, to be taught happiness. You have almost known all this? Yes, almost. But you did not know, few knew that a small remnant still survived, remained there outside the wall, naked. They withdrew into the woods and they learned how to live from the trees, from the animals and the birds and the flowers and the sun. And they have grown a coat of fur, but under the fur, they have preserved their hot red blood. And with you, it's worse. You're overgrown with figures. Figures crawl all over you like lice. You should be stripped of everything and driven naked into the woods to learn to tremble with fear, with joy, with wild rage, with cold, to pray to fire. And we, Nephi, we want. No, wait, Nephi, what is Nephi? Nephi is an ancient name. It is he who. Do you remember out there the image of the youth drawn on the stone? Or no, I'll try to say it in your language. It will be easier for you to understand. There were two forces in the world, entropy and energy. One leads to blissful quietude, to happy equilibrium, and the other to destruction of equilibrium, to tormentingly endless movement. Entropy was worshipped as God by our, or rather your ancestors, the Christians. But we anti-Christians, and at the moment, there was a barely audible, a whispered knock at the door, and the man with the squashed face with the forehead pushed low over his eyes, who had often brought me notes from I-330, burst into the room. He rushed up to us, stopped, his breath hissing like an air pump, unable to say a word. He must have run at top speed. What is it? What happened? She seized him by the hand. They're coming here, he finally panted. Guards, and with them that, what'd you call them? Like a hunchback. S? Yes, they're right here in the house. They'll be here in a moment. Quick, quick. Nonsense. There's time, she laughed, and in her eyes sparks, gay tongues of flame. It was either absurd, reckless courage, or something else, still unknown to me. For the benefactor's sake, but you must realize this is for the benefactor's sake. A sharp triangle, a smile. Well, then, for my sake, I beg you. And I still had to talk to you about a certain matter. Oh, well, tomorrow. She gaily nodded to me. The other, coming out for a fraction of a second from under his forehead, nodded too. And then I was alone. Quick to the table, I opened my notes. I picked up a pen. They must find me at this work for the benefit of the one state. And suddenly, every hair on my head came alive and separate, stirring. What if they take it and read at least one page of these last notes? I sat at the table motionless and saw the trembling of the walls, the trembling of the pen in my hand, the swaying blurring of the letters. Hide it. But where? Everything is glass. Burn it. But they will see from the next room, from the hall. And then I could not. I was no longer able to destroy this anguished, but perhaps most precious piece of myself. From the distance in the corridor, voices, steps, I only managed to snatch a handful of the sheets and thrust them under myself, and now I was riveted to the chair, which trembled with every atom, and the floor under my feet, a ship's deck, up and down. Shrinking into a tiny lump, huddling under the shelter of my brow, I saw stealthily out of the corner of my eye how they went from room to room, beginning at the right end of the hall and coming nearer, nearer. Some of them sat numbed like me. Others jumped up to meet them, throwing their doors wide open. Lucky ones. If only I could also. The benefactor is the most perfect disinfection, essential to mankind, and therefore, in the organism of the one state, no peristalsis. With a jumping pen, I squeezed out this utter nonsense, bending ever lower on the table, while in my head there was this crazy hammering. And with my back, I heard the door handle click. A gust of air, the chair under me danced. And with an effort, I tore myself away from the page and turned to my visitors. How difficult is it to play games? Who spoke to me of games today? They were led by S, glumly, silently, quickly. His eyes bored wells into me, into my chair, in the pages quivering under my hand, and then for a second, familiar everyday faces on the threshold, one separating from among them inflated pink-brown gills. I recalled everything that had taken place in this room half an hour ago, and it became clear to me that in a moment my whole being throbbed and pulsed in that fortunately untransparent part of my body which covered the manuscript. You approached S from behind, cautiously touched his sleeve, and said in a low voice, "This is D503, the builder of the integral. You must have heard of him. He's always working here at his table. Doesn't spare himself at all." And I had, well, what an extraordinary woman. And S slid over to me, bent over my shoulder, over the table, and I tried to cover the writing with my elbow, but he shouted sternly, "You will show me what you have there instantly." Flushed with shame, I held the paper out to him, and he read it, and I saw a smile slip out of his eyes and flick down his face and settle somewhere in the right corner of his lips with a faint quiver of its tail. Somewhat ambiguous. Nevertheless, well, continue. We shall not disturb you any more. And he plashed away like paddles on the water towards the door, and every step returned to me gradually my feet, my hands, my fingers. My soul again spread equally throughout my body, and I was able to breathe. And the last thing you lingered a moment in my room and came over to me, bent my ear, and in a whisper, "It's your luck that I..." What did she mean by that? And later in the evening, I learned that they had taken away 3 numbers. However, no one speaks aloud about this or about anything that is happening these days. The educational influence of the guardians invisibly present in our midst. Conversations deal chiefly with the rapid fall of the barometer and the change of the weather. 29th entry. Threads on the face, sprouts, unnatural compression. Strange the barometer is falling, but there is still no wind. Quiet, somewhere above the storm that is still inaudible to us has started. Clouds are rushing madly. They are still few, separate, jagged fragments. And it seems as if a city has already been overthrown up above, and pieces of walls and towers are tumbling down, growing before our eyes with terrifying speed, nearer and nearer. But they will still fly through blue infinity before they drop to the very bottom where we are. And here below there is silence. In the air, thin, incomprehensible, almost invisible threads. Every autumn they are carried here from the outside, from beyond the wall. Slowly they float, and suddenly you feel something alien, invisible on your face, and you want to brush it off. But no, you cannot. You cannot rid yourself of it. There are especially many of these threads along the green wall where I walked this morning. I-330 asked me to meet her in the ancient house, in our old apartment. I was approaching the opaque mass of the ancient house when I heard behind me someone's short, rapid steps and hurried breathing, and I glanced back. O was trying to catch up with me. All of her was firmly rounded in some special, somehow complete way. Her arms, the cups of her breasts, her entire body so familiar to me, filled out, rounded, stretched her unif, and in a moment it seemed they would break the thin cloth and burst into the sunlight. And I thought, out there in the green jungles, the sprouts push as stubbornly through the earth in the spring, hurrying to send out branches, leaves to bloom. For several seconds she was silent, her blue eyes looking radiantly into my face. "I saw you on Unanimity Day. I saw you too." And I remembered instantly how she had stood below in the narrow passageway, pressing herself to the wall, shielding her stomach with her arms. Involuntarily, I glanced at it, round under the unif. She evidently caught my glance. All of her turned roundly pink, a pink smile. "I'm so happy, so happy. I'm full, to the brim." I walk about and I hear nothing around me, listening all the time inside me. And I was silent. There was something foreign on my face, disturbing, but I cannot rid myself of it. And then suddenly, still glowing with blue radiance, she seized my hand and I felt her lips on it. It was the first time in my life this happened to me, some unknown ancient caress causing me such shame and pain that I, too roughly perhaps, pulled away my hand. You've lost your mind. No, that isn't. Well, I mean, why such happiness? Have you forgotten what awaits you? If not now, then in a month or in 2 months? Oh, this is We by Yevgeny Zamyatin. This is part 6. The rest is on the playlist. The light went out of her, all of her roundness crumpled, shriveled at once, and in my heart, an unpleasant, a painful compression connected with a sense of pity. But the heart is nothing but an ideal pump. Compression, shrinkage, the sucking of fluid by a pump are technical absurdities. It is clear then how essentially preposterous, unnatural, and morbid are the loves, pities, and all the other nonsense that causes such compressions. Silence. On the left, the foggy green glass of the wall. Ahead, the dark red massive house, and these two colors, adding up, produced within me what I thought was a brilliant idea. Wait, I know how to save you. I'll free you of the need to die after seeing your child. You will be able to nurse it. You understand? You'll watch it grow in your arms, round out, fill up, and ripen like a fruit. She trembled violently and clutched at me. Do you remember that woman, that time, a long time ago during our walk? Well, she is here now in the ancient house. Come with me to her. I promise everything will be arranged at once. And I saw already in my mind's eye how together with I-330 we led her through the corridors, and I saw her there among the flowers and the grasses and the leaves. But she recoiled from me. The horns of her rosy crescent quivered and bent down. It's that one, she said. I was embarrassed for some reason. Well, yes, it is. And you want me to go to her, to ask her to, you don't even dare speak to me about it again. And stooping, she walked rapidly away. And then, as if suddenly remembering something, she turned and cried, So I will die. And I don't care. And it doesn't concern you. What does it matter to you? Silence. Pieces of blue walls and towers tumble from above, grown larger with terrifying speed, but they must still fly hours, perhaps days, through infinity. The invisible threads float slowly and settle on my face, and it is impossible to shake them off, to rid myself of them. And I slowly walk to the ancient house, and in my heart, an absurd, agonizing compression. This is 30th entry. The final number, Galileo's mistake. Would it not be better? Here is my conversation with I-330 yesterday at the ancient house in the midst of motley, noisy colors, reds, greens, bronze yellows, whites, oranges, stunning the mind, breaking up the logical flow of thought. And all the time under the frozen marble smile of the pug-nosed ancient poet. I reproduce this conversation to the letter, for it seems to me that it will be of vast, decisive importance to the destiny of the one state, nay, of the entire universe. Besides, perhaps, my unknown readers, you will find in it certain vindications of me. I-330 flung everything at me immediately, without preliminaries. I know the integral is to make its first trial flight the day after tomorrow. On that day, we shall seize it. What? The day after tomorrow? Yes. Sit down, calm yourself. We cannot lose a minute. Among the hundreds rounded up at random by the Guardian last night, there were 12 Nephi. If we delay a day or two, they will perish. I was silent. To observe the test, they will have to send you electricians, mechanics, doctors, meteorologists, exactly at 12. Remember, this is when the lunch bell will ring, and everyone will go to the dining room, and we shall remain in the corridor, lock them in, and the integral is ours. Do you understand? It must be done at any cost. The integral in our hands will be the weapon that will help us finish everything quickly and painlessly at once. Their arrows, insignificant gnats against a falcon. And then, if it becomes essential, we can simply direct the motor exhaust downwards, and by their work alone. I jumped up. It's unthinkable, absurd. Don't you realize that what you're planning is a revolution? Yes, revolution. Why is this absurd? It is absurd because there can be no revolution, because I'm saying this, not you, our revolution was the final one. and there can be no others. Everyone knows this. The mocking, sharp triangle of the eyebrows. My dear, you are a mathematician. More, you are a philosopher, a mathematical philosopher. Well, then, name me the final number. Well, what do you mean? I don't understand. What final number? Well, the final, the ultimate, the largest. But that's preposterous. The number of numbers is infinite. I mean, how can there be a final number? Well, then how can there be a final revolution? There is no final one. Revolutions are infinite. The final one is for children. Children are frightened by infinity, and it's important that children sleep peacefully at night. But what sense is there in all of this for the benefactor's sake? What sense if everybody is already happy? Well, let us suppose, very well, suppose it is so. And what next? Ridiculous and utterly childish question. Tell children a story to the very end, and you will still be sure to ask, and what's next, and why? Well, children are the only bold philosophers, and bold philosophers are invariably children. Exactly, just like children, we must always ask, and what's next? And there's nothing next, period, throughout the universe, spread uniformly everywhere. Ah, uniformly everywhere. That's exactly where it is. Entropy, psychological entropy. It is not clear to you, a mathematician, that the only differences in temperatures, thermal contrasts make for life. And if everywhere throughout the universe there are equally warm or equally cool bodies, they must be brought into collusion to get fire, explosion, Gehenna, and we will bring them into collision. But I-330, you must understand, this was exactly what our forebears did during the 200 Years' War. Oh, and they were right, 1,000 times right, but they made one mistake. They later came to believe that they had the final number, which does not exist in nature. Their mistake was the mistake of Galileo. He was right that the Earth revolves around the sun, but he did not know that the whole solar system also revolves around some other center. And he did not know that the real, not the relative, orbit of the Earth is not some naive circle. And you? Well, we know for the time being that there is no final number. We may forget it. No, we are even sure to forget it when we get old, as everything inevitably gets old, and then we too shall drop like leaves in autumn from the tree, like you, the day after tomorrow. No, my dear, not you. For you are with us. You are with us. Fiery, stormy, flashing. I've never seen her like that. She embraced me with all of herself and disappeared. And I disappeared. At the last, looking firmly, steadily into my eyes, remember then, at 12. And I said, yes, I remember. And she left, and I was alone among the riotous, many-voiced tumult of blue, red, green, bronze, yellow, orange colors. Yes, at 12, and suddenly an absurd sensation of something alien settled on my face, impossible to brush off, and suddenly, yesterday morning, you and what she had shouted into I-330's face. Why? What nonsense. I hurried outside and home, and somewhere behind me I heard the piercing cries of birds over the wall, and before me in the setting sun the spheres of the cupolas of the huge flaming cubes of houses, the spire of the accumulator tower like lightning frozen in the sky. And all of this perfect geometric beauty will have to be by me, by my own hands. Is there no way out? Is there no other road? Past one of the auditoriums, I forget the number, inside it, benches piled up in a heap. In the middle, tables covered with sheets of pure white glass cloth. On the white, a stain of the sun's pink blood, and concealed in all of this, some unknown and therefore frightening tomorrow. Is unnatural for a thinking, seeing being to live amidst irregulars, unknown X's. And if you were blindfolded and forced to walk, feeling your way, stumbling, and knowing that you were somewhere just nearby the edge, a single step, and all that will remain of you will be flattened, mangled piece of flesh. Am I not like this now? And what if, without waiting, I plunge myself head down? Would it not be the correct way, disentangling everything at once? 31st entry. The great operation. I have forgotten everything. A train collision. Saved. At the very moment when it seemed that there was no longer anything to grasp, when it seemed that everything was finished, it is as though you have already attended the affairs, the stairs to the benefactor's dread machine, and the glass bell has come down over you with a heavy clank, and for the last time in your life, quick, quick, you drink the blue sky with your eyes. And then suddenly it's only a dream. The sun is pink and gay, and the wall is there, and what joy is to stroke the cold wall with your hand, and the pillow, what an endless delight to watch and watch the hollow left by your head on the white pillow. This was approximately what I felt when I read the One State Gazette this morning. It had been a terrible dream, and now it was over. And I, faint hearted non believer, I had already thought of the willful death. I am ashamed to read the last lines I have written yesterday, but it is all the same now. Uh, let them stay as a reminder of the incredible thing that may have happened and now will not happen. No, it will not happen. The front page of the One Gazette glowed with a proclamation: Rejoice! For henceforth you shall be perfect. Until this day, your own creation, machines, were more perfect than you. How? Every spark of a dynamo is a spark of the purest reason. Each movement of the piston is a flawless syllogism. But are you not possessors of the same unerring reason? The philosophy of cranes, presses, and pumps is as perfect and clear as a compass drawn circle. Is your philosophy less compass drawn? The beauty of a mechanism is in its rhythm, as steady and precise as it is the pendulum. But you, nurtured from earliest infancy on the Taylor system, have you not become pendulum precise? Except for one thing, machines have no imagination. Have you ever seen the face of a pump cylinder break into a distant, foolish, dreamy smile while it works? Have you ever heard of cranes restlessly turning from side to side and sighing at night during the hours designated for rest? No. And you blush with shame. The guardians have noticed more and more such smiles and sighs of late, and hide your eyes. Historians of the One State ask for retirement so that they need not record disgraceful events. But this is not your fault. You are sick. The name of the sickness is it is a worm that gnaws out black lines on the forehead. It is a fever that drives you to escape ever farther, even if this farther begins with where happiness ends. This is the last barricade on our way to happiness. Rejoice then, this barricade has already been blown up. The road is open. The latest discovery of state science is the location of the center of the imagination, a miserable little nodule in the brain in the area of the pons of Varoli. Triple X, X-ray cautery of this nodule, and you are cured of imagination forever. You are perfect. You are machine-like. The road to 100% happiness is free. Hurry then, everyone, old and young, hurry to submit to the great operation. Hurry to the auditoriums where the great operation is being performed. Long live the great operation. Long live the One State. Long live the benefactor. You, if you are reading all of this not in my notes, but resembling some fanciful ancient novel, if this newspaper still smelling of printer's ink were trembling in your hands as it does in mine, if you knew, as I know, that this is the most actual reality, if not today's, then tomorrow's, would you not feel as I do? Wouldn't your head reel as mine does? Wouldn't these eerie, sweet, icy needle pricks run down your back and your arms? Would it not seem to you that you're a giant atlas, and if you straighten up, you will inevitably strike the glass ceiling with your head? I seized the telephone receiver. I 3:30, yes, 3:30, and then I cried out breathlessly, "You're home, yes? Have you read it? You're reading it? But it is remarkable." Yes. A long, dark silence, and the receiver hummed faintly, pondered something. "I must see you today. Yes, at my place after 16, without fail." Dearest, dear, dear, such a dear, without fail. I felt myself smiling and could not stop. And now I would carry the smile along the street, high like a light. Outside, the wind swept at me. It whirled and howled, it whipped, but I felt all the more exultant. Whistle, scream, it didn't matter now. You can no longer topple walls, and if cast iron flying clouds tumble overhead, let them tumble. They cannot blot out the sun. We have forever chained it to the zenith, we, Joshua's son of Nun. At the corner of a dense group of Joshuas stood with their foreheads glued to the glass wall. Inside, a man already lay stretched out on the dazzling white table. From under the white, the bare soles of his feet formed a yellow angle. White doctors were bent over his head, a white hand stretched to another hand, a hypodermic syringe filled with something. And you, why don't you go in? I asked, addressing no one, or rather everyone. And what about you? A spherical head turned to me. I will, later. I must first. Somewhat embarrassed, I withdrew. I really had to see her at 3:30 first, but why first? This I could not answer. The dock, icy blue, the integral shimmered, sparkled in the machine compartment. The dynamo hummed gently, caressing, repeating some word over and over, and the word seemed familiar, one of my own. And I bent over it, and I stroked the long, cold tube of the engine. Dear, so dear, tomorrow you will come alive. Tomorrow, for the first time in your life, you will be shaken by the fiery, flaming sparks within your womb. How would I be looking at this mighty glass monster if everything had remained as yesterday, if I knew that tomorrow at 12 I would betray it? Yes, betray. Cautiously, someone touched my elbow from the back, and I turned the plate-like flat face of the second builder. You know it already, he said. What? The operation? Yes, how strangely everything at once. No, not that. The trial flight has been postponed to the day after tomorrow, all because of this operation. And we were rushing, doing our best, all for nothing. All because of this operation. What a ridiculous, stupid man, sees nothing beyond his flat face. If he only knew that were it not for the operation, he would be locked up in a glass box tomorrow at 12, rushing about trying to climb the walls. In my room at 15:30, I entered and saw you, and she sat at my table, bony, straight, rigid, her right cheek set firmly on her hand. She must have waited long, for when she jumped up to meet me, 5 dents remained on her cheek from her fingers. For a second, I recalled that wretched morning and herself there, raging by the table next to I-330, but only for a second, and then the memory was washed away by today's sun. It was like entering the room on a bright day and absently turning the switch. The bulbs light up, but it is invisible, pallid, absurd, unneeded. Without a thought, I held my hand out to her, and I forgave her everything. She seized both my hands and pressed them hard in her own bony ones, and her sagging cheeks quivering with excitement like some ancient ornament. She said, I have been waiting. Only for a moment. I only wanted to say how happy I am, how glad for you. You understand tomorrow or the day after you will be completely well, newly born. I saw some sheets of paper on the table, the last pages of my notes. There they lay as I left them in the evening. If she had seen what I had written there, however, it no longer mattered. Now it was merely history, ridiculously distant, like something seen through the wrong end of the binoculars. Yes, I said, and just now I was walking down the street, and there was a man before me, and his shadow on the pavement, and imagine the shadow glowed, and it seems to me, I am certain that tomorrow there will be no shadows, no man, no object will cast a shadow, the sun will shine through everything. She spoke gently and sternly. You are a dreamer. I would not permit the children at school to speak like that. And she went on about the children, how they had taken them all to the operation, and how they had to be tied up there, and that love must be ruthless. Yes, ruthless. And that she thought she would at last decide. And she smoothed the gray blue cloth over her knees quickly and silently plastered me over with her smile and left. Fortunately, the sun had not yet stopped today, and it was still running, and now it was 16. I knocked at the door, my heart beating. Come in. And I was down on the floor near her chair, embracing her legs, head thrown back and looking into her eyes, one then the other, and in each seeing myself in a marvelous captivity. And then outside the wall, a storm, clouds darkening more and more like cast iron. Let them. My head could not contain the flow of riotous wild words spilling over the rim. I spoke aloud and together with the sun, and we were flying somewhere. But now we knew where, and behind us, planets spring flame, inhabited by fiery singing flowers and mute blue planets where sentient rational stones were organized into societies, planets which, like our Earth, had reached the summit of absolute and 100% happiness. Suddenly from above, but don't you think that the society at the summit is precisely a society organized of stones? The triangle of her eyebrows grew sharper, darker. And happiness, well, after all, desires torment us, don't they? And clearly happiness is when there are no more desires, not one. What a mistake, what a ridiculous prejudice it's been to have marked happiness always with a plus sign. Absolute happiness should, of course, carry a minus sign, the divine minus. I remember I muttered in confusion, absolute minus, minus 273 degrees. Precisely, minus 273 degrees, somewhat chilly, but wouldn't that in itself prove that we are at the summit? As once, a long time ago, she somehow spoke for me, through me, unfolding my ideas to the very end. But there was something sharply frightening in it, and I could not bear it, and with effort I forced a no out of myself. No, I said, you are mocking me. And she laughed loudly, too loudly, and quickly, in a second, she laughed herself to some unseen edge, stumbled, and fell. A silence. She rose and placed her hands upon my shoulders and then looked at me slowly and long and then pulled me to herself, and then there was nothing, only her hot, sharp lips. Farewell. It came from far, from above, and it took a long time to reach me, a minute perhaps or two. What do you mean, farewell? Well, you are sick. You have committed crimes because of me. Has it not been a torment to you? And now the operation, and you will cure yourself of me, and that means farewell. No, I cried out, a piteously sharp, dark triangle on white. What? What, you don't want happiness? My head was splitting. Two logical trains collided, climbing upon each other, crashing, splintering. Well, I'm waiting. Make your choice. The operation and 100% happiness, or I cannot without you. I want nothing without you, I said, or merely thought. I'm not sure, but she heard. Yes, I know, she answered, and her hands still on my shoulders, her eyes still holding mine. Until tomorrow, then. Tomorrow at 12, you remember? No, it's been postponed for a day, the day after tomorrow. All the better for us, at 12, the day after tomorrow. And I walked alone through the twilit street, and the wind was whirling, driving, carrying me like a slip of paper. Fragments of cast iron sky flew and flew. They had another day, 2 days to hurtle through infinity. The unifs of passerby brushed against me, but I walked alone. I saw it clearly. Everyone was saved, but there was no salvation for me. I did not want salvation. 32nd entry. I do not believe tractors, a human splinter. Do you believe that you will die? Yes, man is mortal and I am man, hence. No, this is not what I mean. I know you know this. I am asking, have you ever really believed it totally, not with your mind, but with your body? Have you ever felt that one day the fingers holding this very page will be icy yellow? No, of course you don't believe it. And this is why you have not jumped from the 10th floor down to the pavement. This is why you are still eating, turning the page, shaving, smiling, writing. The same, yes, exactly the same is true of me today. I know that this black arrow on the dark clock on the clock will crawl down here below to midnight and will slowly rise again and will step across some final line, and the incredible tomorrow will be here. I know this, but somehow I also don't believe it. Or perhaps it seems to me that 24 hours are 24 years, and this is why I can still do something. Hurry, somewhere, answer questions, climb the ladder to the integral. I still feel it. I still feel it rocking on the water. I know I must grasp the handrail and feel the cold glass under my hand. I see the transparent living cranes bending their long bird like necks, stretching their beaks, and tenderly, solicitously feeding the integral with the terrible explosive food for its motors. And below on the river, I clearly see the blue watery veins and nodes swollen with wind. But all of this is quite apart from me, extraneous, flat like a scheme on a sheet of paper. And it is strange that the flat paper face of the second builder is suddenly speaking. Well, then, how much fuel shall we take on for the motors? If you think of 3 or 3.5 hours before me, projected on the blueprint, my hand with the calculator, the logarithmic dial at 15. 15 tons. No, better load yet. Yes, load 100. Because after all, I do know that tomorrow. And I see from somewhere at the side my hand with the digital dial starts to tremble faintly. 100? Why so much? That would be like for a week. A week? Much longer. Anything might happen. Who knows? I know. The wind howls. The air is tightly filled with something invisible to the very top. And I find it hard to breathe, hard to walk. And slowly, with an effort, without stopping for a second, the arrow crawls upon the face of the clock on the accumulator tower at the end of the avenue. The spire is in the clouds, dim, blue, howling in muted tones, sucking electricity. The trumpets of the music plant howl as ever in rows four abreast, but the rows are somehow unsolid. Perhaps it is the wind that makes them waver, bend more and more. Now that they have collided with something on the corner, they flow back, and there is a dense, congealed, immobile cluster breathing rapidly. Suddenly, everyone is craning his neck. Look, no, look, that way, quick. It's they, it's they. I'll never. Better put my hand straight into the machine. Shh, you're mad. In the auditorium at the corner of the door is gaping wide, and a slow, heavy column of some 50 people emerge. People? No, that does not describe them. These are not feet. They are stiff, heavy wheels moved by some invisible transmission belt. These are not people. They are the humanoid tractors. Over their heads, a white banner is flapping in the wind, a golden sun embroidered on it. Between the sun's rays, one words, "We are the first. We have already undergone the operation. Everyone follow us." Slowly, irresistibly, they plow through the crowd, and it is clear that if there were a wall, a tree, a house in their way, they would without halting plow through the wall, the tree, the house. And now they are in the middle of the avenue, hands locked, and they spread out into a chain facing us, and we, a tense knot, necks stretched, heads bristling forward, wait. Clouds, whistling wind, and suddenly the flanks of the chain on the right and the left bend quickly and rush upon us, faster, faster, like a heavy machine speeding downhill. They lock us into the ring and towards the gaping doors, into the doors inside. Someone's piercing scream. They're driving us in, run, and everyone rushes. Just near the wall, there is a still narrow living gateway, and everyone streams there, head forward, heads instantly, sharp as wedges, sharp elbows, shoulders, sides, like a jet of water compressed inside a fire hose. They spread fan like and all around, stamping feet, swinging arms, unifs from somewhere. And for an instant, a glimpse of a double curved S like body, translucent wing ears, and he is gone as though swallowed by the earth. And I am alone in the midst of flashing arms and feet, and I run. I dive into a doorway for a moment's breath, my back pressed to the door, and instantly a tiny human splinter, as if driven to me by the wind. I was following you all the time. I do not want to, you understand, I do not want to, I agree. Round, tiny hands upon my sleeve, round blue eyes. It is O. She seems to slide down among the wall and slump onto the ground, shrunk into a little ball below on the cold stair, and I bend over her, stroking her head, her face. My hands are wet, as though I were very big and she altogether tiny, a tiny part of my own self. This is very different from the feeling for I-330. It seems to me that something like it may have existed among the ancients towards their private children. below through the hands, covering the face just audibly. Every night I cannot, if they cure me every night alone in the darkness, I think about him, about what he will be like, how I will, there will be nothing for me to live by. You understand, and you must. A preposterous feeling, but I know, yes, yes, I must. Preposterous because this duty of mine is yet another crime. Preposterous because white cannot be at the same time black. Duty and crime cannot coincide, or there is no black or white in life, and the color depends only on the initial logical premise. And if the premise was that I unlawfully gave her a child, very well, but don't, I say. You understand. I could take you to I-330, I offered that time so that she, yes, quietly without taking her hands from her face. And I helped her up and silently, each with our own thoughts, who knows, perhaps about the same thing, along the darkening street, among the mute leaden houses, through the taut swishing branches of wind. At a certain transparent, tense point, I heard through the whistling of the wind familiar slapping steps, and at the corner I glanced back, and in the midst of the rushing upside down clouds, recollected in the dim glass of the pavement, I saw S. Immediately my hands were not my own, swinging not out of time, and I was telling O loudly that tomorrow, yes, tomorrow, the integral would go up for the first time, and it would be something utterly unprecedented, uncanny, and miraculous. And O gave me an astonished, round, blue-faced stare, looking at my loudly, senselessly swinging arms. But I did not let her say a word. I shouted on, and there with me, separately, heard only by myself, the feverish humming, hammering thought, no, I must not. I must somehow. I must not lead him to I-330. Instead of turning left, I turned right. The bridge, offering its obedience, slavishly bent back to the three of us, to me, O, and the S behind us. The brightly lit buildings on the other side scattered lights into the water. The lights broke into thousands of feverishly leaping sparks, sprayed with frenzied white foam. The wind hummed like a thick bass string stretched somewhere low overhead and through the bass behind us all the time. The house where I live, at the door, O stopped and began to say something. No, you promised. I did not let her finish, and hurriedly I pushed her into the entrance, and we were in the lobby inside, and over the control desk, the familiar, excitedly quivering, sagging cheeks. A dense cluster of numbers in the heated argument, heads looking over the banister from the second floor, people running singly down the stairs, but I would be about that later. And now quickly I drew O into the opposite corner, sat down, back against the wall. Behind the wall, I saw, gliding back and forth, a dark, large-headed shadow, and took out a notepad. O slowly sagged into her chair as though her body were melting, evaporating under her unif, and there were only an empty unif and empty eyes that sucked you into their blue emptiness. And wearily, why did you bring me here? You lied to me. No, be quiet. Look at that way. You see, behind the wall? Yes, a shadow. He follows me all the time. I cannot, you understand, I must not. I'll write 2 words, and you will take the note and go alone. I know that he will remain here. The body stirred again under the unif, that belly rounded out a little on the cheeks, a faint, rosy dawn, and I slipped the note into her cold fingers, firmly pressed her hand, and dipped my eyes for the last time into her blue eyes. Goodbye. Perhaps someday we shall. And she took away her hand. Stooping, she walked off slowly, 2 steps, and quickly she turned and was again next to me. Her lips moved, with her eyes, her lips, all of her, a single word, saving a single word to me. And what an unbearable smile, what pain. And then a bent, tiny human splinter in the doorway, a tiny shadow behind the wall, without looking back, quickly, ever more quickly. I went over to Yu's desk, excitedly, indignantly, inflating her gills. She said to me, you understand, they all seem to have lost their heads. He insists that he has seen some human creature near the ancient house, naked and all covered with fur. And from the dense cluster of heads, a voice, yes, I'll say it again, I saw it, yes. Well, what do you think of that? The man's delirious. And this delirious of hers was so sure, so unbending that I asked myself, perhaps all of it, all that's been happening to me and around me lately is really nothing but delirium. But then I glanced at my hairy hands and I remembered there must be a drop of forest blood in you. Perhaps that is why. No, fortunately, it is not delirium. No, unfortunately, it is not delirium. 33rd entry. Topics. No outline, hurriedly, the last. The day has come, quick, the newspaper. Perhaps I read it with my eyes, precisely my eyes are now like a pen, a calculator with which you hold in your hands and feel it is apart from you as an instrument. In bold type across the front page, the enemies of happiness are not sleeping. Hold on to your happiness with both hands. Tomorrow, all work will halt. All numbers shall report for the operation. Those who fail to do so will be subject to the benefactor's machine. Tomorrow, will there be some tomorrow? By daily habit, I stretch my hand, an instrument, to the bookshelf to add today's Gazette to the others in the binding stamped with the gold design. And on my way, what for? What does it matter? I shall never return to this room. The newspaper drops to the floor, and I stand up and I look around the room, the whole room. I hastily gather up into an invisible valise all that I'm sorry to leave behind, the table, the books, the chair. I-330 sat in it that day, and I below on the floor, the bed, and then for a moment or two, absurdly waiting for some miracle. Perhaps the telephone will ring. Perhaps she'll say that. No, there is no miracle. I am leaving into the unknown. These are my last lines. Goodbye, my beloved readers, with whom I have lived through so many pages, to whom I have contracted the soul sickness. I have exposed all myself to the last crushed little screw, the last broken spring. I am leaving. 34th entry. The excused one, sunny night, and Radio Valkyrie. Oh, if I had really smashed myself and all the others to smithereens, if I had really found myself with her somewhere behind the wall, among the beasts, baring their yellow fangs, if I had never returned here, it would have been 1,000,000,000 times easier. But now what? To go and strangle that? But how would that help? No, no. Take yourself in hand, D503. Set yourself upon some firm logical axis, if only for a short time. Bear down on the lever with all your strength, and like an ancient slave, turn the millstone of syllogisms until you write down, think over everything that happened. When I boarded the Integral, everybody who was already there, each at his own point, all the cells in the gigantic glass beehive were full. Through the glass decks, tiny human ants near the telegraphs, dynamos, transformers, altimeters, valves, indicators, engines, pumps, tubes. In the lounge, a group of unknown men over schemes and instruments probably assigned there by the Scientific Bureau. And with them, the second builder with two of his assistants. All three with their heads drawn, turtle-like, into their shoulders and their faces gray, autumnal, joyless. Well, I ask. Oh, a bit nervous, one of them said with a gray, lusterless smile. Who knows where we may have to land? And generally, it's uncertain. It was unbearable to look at them, all those whom I would be in an hour with my own hands. It was unbearable to look at them, at those whom I would in an hour with my own hands eject from the comfortable figures of the table of hours, tearing them away from the maternal breast of the one state. They reminded me of the tragic figures of the three excused ones, whose story is known to every schoolboy. It is a story of how three numbers were, by way of an experiment, excused from work for a month to do what they liked, to go where they wished, and the wretches loitered near their usual places of work, peering inside with their hungry eyes, and they stood in the street after hour, repeating the motions which they had already become necessary to their organisms at the given times of day. And they sawed and planned planed in the air and swung invisible hammers and struck invisible bricks. And finally, on the 10th day, unable to endure it any longer, they linked hands, walked into the water, and to the sounds of the march went deeper and deeper until the water put an end to their misery. I repeat, it was painful for me to look at them. I hurried to leave them. I will check the machine compartment, I said, and then we're off. They asked me questions. What voltage was to be used for the starting blast? And how much water ballast for the stern tank? And there was a phonograph inside me. It answered all the questions promptly and precisely, while I continued inwardly without interruption with my own thoughts. Suddenly, in a narrow passageway, something reached me within, and from that moment, it all began. In the narrowest passageway, gray youths, gray faces flickered past me, and for a second, one face, hair low in the forehead, deep-set eyes, and that same man, I understood. They were here, and there was no escape from all of this anywhere, and the only minutes remained, a few dozen minutes. The tiniest molecular shivers ran through my body. They did not stop at the very end, as though a huge number had been set up within me, and the structure of my body, it was too slight for it, and the walls, the partitions, the cables, the beams, the lights, everything trembled. I did not know yet whether she was there, but there was no more time now. I was called upstairs to the command cabin. It was time to go. Where? Gray, lusterless faces, tense blue veins below in the water, heavy cast iron layers of sky, and how hard to lift my cast iron hand to pick up the receiver of the command telephone. Up 45 degrees. A dull blast, a jolt, a frenzied white-green mountain of water aft, the deck slipping away from underfoot, a soft rubbery and everything below, all of life forever. For a second, we were falling deeper and deeper into some funnel, and everything contracted. The icy blue relief map of the city, the round bubbles of its cupolas, the solitary leaden finger of the accumulator tower, and then a momentary cottonwood curtain of clouds. We plunged through it, sun and blue sky, and seconds, minutes, miles, the blue was rapidly congealing, filling up with darkness, and stars emerged like drops of silvery cold sweat. And now the uncanny, intolerably bright, black, starry, sunny night. It was like suddenly becoming deaf. You could see the roaring trumpets, but you could only see them. The trumpets are mute. All is silence. The sun was mute. And this was natural. It was to be expected. We had left the Earth's atmosphere, but everything had happened so quickly, had taken everyone so unawares that everyone around was cowed, silenced. And to me, it all seemed easier somehow under this mute, fantastic sun, as though crumpling up for the last time, I had already crossed the inescapable threshold, and my body was somewhere there below, while I sped through the new world, where everything must be so unfamiliar, so upside down. Hold the course, I shouted into the receiver, or perhaps it was not I, but the phonograph in me, and with a mechanical hinged hand, I thrust the command phone into the hands of the second builder. And I, shaken from head to foot by the finest molecular trembling which I alone could feel, ran downstairs to look for the door to the lounge, the one that in an hour would heavily click shut, but the door someone I did not know, short, with a face like hundreds, thousands of others, a face that would be lost in a crowd. And only his hands were unusual, extraordinarily long down to his knees, as though taken in a hurry by mistake from another human set. A long arm stretched out, barred the way. Where to? Clearly he did not know that I knew everything. Very well, perhaps this was as it should be, and looking down on him deliberately curt, I said, I am the builder of the integral. I supervise the tests, understand? And the arm was gone. The lounge, over the instruments and the maps, gray, bristly heads and yellow heads, bald, ripe, and quickly I swept them with a glance and back along the corridor, down the hatch to the engine room, heat and din of pipes red hot from the explosions, cranks gleaming in a desperate, drunken dance, the incessant, faintly visible quiver of arrows on the dials. And finally, at the tachometer, he, with the low forehead, bent over a notebook. Listen, The din made it necessary to shout into his ear, "Is she here? Where is she?" In the shadow under the forehead, a smile. She? There, in the radio telephone room. And I rushed in. There were three of them, all in winged receiving helmets, and she seemed a head taller than ever, winged, gleaming, flying like the ancient Valkyries, and the huge blue sparks above over the radio antenna seemed to come from her, and the faint lightning smell of ozone, and also from her. Someone, no, you, I said to her breathlessly from running. I must transmit a message down to the earth, to the dock. Come, I'll dictate it. And next to the apparatus room, there was a tiny box like cabin. Side by side at the table, I found her hand and pressed it hard. Well, what next? I don't know. Do you realize how wonderful it is to fly, not knowing where to fly? Nowhere. And soon it will be 12, and who knows what is to come, and night. Where shall we be at night, you and I? Perhaps on grass, on dry leaves? She emanates blue sparks and smells of lightning, and my trembling grows more violent. Write down, I say loudly, still out of breath with running. Time 11:30, velocity 6,800. She, from under the winged helmet, without talking, taking her eyes from the paper quietly. She came to me last night with your note. I know everything. Don't speak. But the child is yours. And I sent her there. She is already safe beyond the wall, and she will live. And back in the commander's cabin, again, the night, delirious with a black starry sky and dazzling sun, the clock hand on the wall limping slowly from minute to minute, and everything is in a fog shaken with a fineness scarcely perceptible to me alone, trembling. For some reason, it seemed to me it would be better if all that was about to follow took place not here, but lower and near the earth. Halt, engineers, I cried into the receiver, still moving by inertia, but slower. Now the integral caught in some hair-thin second, hung for a moment motionless, and then the hair broke, and the integral plunged like a stone, down, faster, and so in silence for minutes, dozens of minutes, I heard my own pulse. The clock hand before my eyes crawled nearer and nearer to 12, and it was clear to me I was the stone. I 330 was the earth, and I a stone thrown by someone's hand, and the stone was irresistibly compelled to fall, to crash against the earth, to smash itself into bits. And what if, below the hard blue smoke of clouds was already visible? What if? But the phonograph inside me picked up the receiver with hinge-like precision, gave the command low speed. The stone no longer fell, and now only the four lower surveil. Sorry, the stone no longer fell, and now only the four lower auxiliaries, 2 fore, 2 aft, puffed wearily, merely to neutralize the integral's weight, and the integral stopped in midair with a slight quiver, firmly anchored about a kilometer from the earth. Everyone rushed out to the deck. It is almost 12, time for the lunch bell, and in bending over the glass railing, hurriedly gulped the unknown world below, beyond the wall, amber, green, blue, the autumn woods, meadows, a lake, and at the edge of a tiny blue saucer, some yellow, bone-like ruins, a threatening yellow, dry finger, probably the spire of an ancient church, miraculously preserved. Look, there to the right. There, in a green wilderness, a rapid spot flew like a brown shadow. I had binoculars in my hands. Mechanically, I brought them to my eyes. Chest deep in the grass, with sweeping tails, a herd of brown horses galloped, and on their backs, those beings, bay, white, raven black. Behind me, and I tell you, I saw a face. Go, tell it to someone else. Here are the binoculars, but they were gone now, an endless green wilderness. And in the wilderness, filling all of all of me and everyone, the piercing quaver of a bell, lunchtime in another minute at 12. The world scattered into momentary, unconnected fragments, and on the steps, somebody's clanking golden badge, and I don't care, it crunched under my heel, a voice, and I say it, there was a face, A dark rectangle, the open door of the lounge, clenched, white, sharp, smiling teeth. And at the moment when the clock began to strike with the agonizing slowness without breathing from one stroke to the next, and the front ranks had already begun to move, the rectangle of the door was suddenly crossed over by two familiar, unnaturally long arms. Stop! Fingers dug into my palms, I-330 next to me. Who is he? Do you know him? Isn't he one of, and he stood on someone's shoulders, over 100 faces, his face like hundreds, thousands of others, yet unique. In the name of the guardians, those to whom I speak, they hear me, each of them hears me. I say to you, we know. We do not know your numbers as yet, but we know everything. The integral shall not be yours. The test flight will be completed, and you will not dare to make a move now. You will do it with your own hands. And afterwards, but I have finished. Silence. The glass squares underfoot are soft as cotton, and my feet are soft as cotton, and she is beside me, utterly white smile, frenzied blue sparks through her teeth into my ear. Ah, so you did it. You fulfilled your duty. Oh, well. Her hand broke from my hand. The Valkyrie's wrathful winged helmet was now somewhere far ahead. Alone, silent, frozen, I walked like all of the others into the lounge. But no, it wasn't I, not I. I spoke of it to no one except those white mute pages. Within me, inaudibly, desperately, loudly, I cried this to her, and she sat across the table opposite me, and she did not once allow her eyes to touch me. Next to her, someone's ripe yellow hand, bald head. I heard it. It was I-330 speaking. Nobility. No, my dear professor, even a simple philological analysis of the word will show that it is nothing but a relic of ancient feudal forms. And I felt myself go pale, and now everyone would see it. But the phonograph within me performed the 50 prescribed masticating movements for every bite. What? Wait a minute. That's how it goes. All right. Yep. All right. It's an odd transition. Prescribed the masticating movements for every bite. I looked myself within me, within an ancient, untransparent house. I piled rocks before my door. I pulled down the shades. Later, the commander's receiver in my handset and flight in icy final anguish through the clouds into the icy, starry, sunny night. Minutes, hours, and evidently all the time at feverish speed, the logical motor, unheard even by me, continued to work within me. For suddenly, at a certain point of blue space, I saw my writing table, and over it U's gill-like cheeks and the forgotten pages of my notes. And it was clear to me, no one but she, everything was clear. Ah, if I could only, I must get to the radio room. The winged helmets, the smell of blue lightning. I remember I was speaking to her loudly. I remember looking through as though I were looking through glass from far away. I am busy. I am receiving messages from below. Dictate to her. In the tiny cabin. In the tiny cabin, after a moment's thought, I dictated firmly, time 1440, down, stop engines, the end of everything. The command cabin, the integral's mechanical heart has been stopped. We are dropping, and my heart cannot keep up. It falls behind. It rises higher and higher into my throat. Clouds, then distant green spot, ever greener, clearer, rushing madly at us. Now the end. The white porcelain twisted face of the second builder. It must be he who pushed me with all his strength. My head struck something, and falling, darkening, I heard through a fog, aft engines, full speed, a sharp leap forward. I remember nothing else. All right, my eyes are getting a little blurry. So I think I'll call it a night, but we just have a little bit left. So this will have to be for the new year. But thanks for joining in, folks, and see you in 2023. We'll end.